man mistakenly deported to a notorious El Salvador prison. For now, President Trump is brushing off a U.S. Supreme Court order to, quote, facilitate his return to the United States. Joining us now, the New York Democratic Congressman Richie Torres. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us. I know you are introducing a bill that would require the U.S. to secure the return of mistakenly deported individuals. Why is this necessary, and will you have any Republican support?
Well, I'm skeptical that we will have Republican support because the Republican Party is fully captive to Donald Trump. But of all the abuses of Donald Trump's presidency, there's no greater threat to liberty than his complete contempt for due process. You know, without due process, what stops Donald Trump from wrongfully labeling any American as a non-citizen gang member and abducting them in the dead of night and rendering them to a foreign prison to be tortured? You know, Donald Trump's actions set a dangerous precedent for our democracy. And so I'm introducing legislation known as the Rescue Act, which would seek to secure the release of those who have been wrongfully deported. You know, if there's a foreign leader like the president of El Salvador who refuses to comply with an order from a federal court to release someone who's been wrongfully deported, there should be geopolitical consequences, and those consequences should be swift and severe. It should include the suspension of relations with the United States and the termination of foreign assistance.
Congressman, if you can't pass this legislation with a veto-proof majority, what else, if anything, can Democrats in Congress do about the president clearly pushing the limits of his power in this way? He even suggested yesterday the possibility of starting to deport American citizens who commit crimes.
Look, we have to exhaust every means of holding Donald Trump accountable, you know, whether it's mobilization on the streets, legislation in the halls of Congress, litigation in the courtroom. You know, we have to throw the kitchen sink and hold Donald Trump accountable. But as far as I'm concerned, the imperial presidency of Donald Trump is as much a product of congressional capitulation as it is of Trump himself. You know, historically, Congress has gone too far in passing too many laws that have concentrated power in the executive. You know, we should repeal the Alien Enemies Act, which enables the president to deport people without due process. We should repeal the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, which has enabled the president to set tariffs that have destabilized the global economy. We need to return power back to where it belongs, which is the United States Congress. The Constitution envisions Congress as the Article I branch.
I want to turn, Congressman, while I have you, to some economic news. The Fed is now signaling it won't be cutting interest rates amid Trump's trade war. And now we're learning that the White House is actively looking for Fed Chair Jerome Powell's replacement. Do you have any concern that Trump will try to fire Powell before his term ends next year?
Look, Donald Trump has no regard for the independence of any institution, including the Federal Reserve. And if he wages a frontal assault on the independence of the Federal Reserve, it's going to send shockwaves through the global economy. Our economy has no greater enemy than uncertainty. You know, if you're a business or an investor, why would you invest in the United States if Donald Trump can radically rewrite the rules in the middle of the game? The only certainty under Donald Trump is uncertainty, and it's doing irreparable damage to the U.S. economy.
Virtually every economist believes these tariffs that Trump has imposed will eventually raise prices for consumers across the board. What are you hearing from your Republican colleagues about that? And are they willing, do you believe, to do anything to push back against these tariffs?
Look, I mean, Republicans will privately express concerns about the tariffs, but the number of Republicans who are willing to speak out against Donald Trump and defend free trade are vanishingly small. I mean, the Republican Party has become a cult of personality around Donald Trump, and his tariff regime is doing an enormous amount of damage to an enormous number of businesses and families in America, and he's sabotaging the American economy to the benefit of China. And even though he's promising to revive manufacturing here in America, his policies are producing the exact opposite. You know, half of all foreign imports in the United States are inputs that support American manufacturing. And when you tax those inputs, as Donald Trump is doing, you're not strengthening American manufacturing, you're weakening it.
And you're in the process, you're making a lot of products, including food, so much more expensive for average Americans out there. Congressman Richie Torres, thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely.